Hard Knocks NFC East episode 2 just dropped, and my big takeaway as an Eagles fan is I was surprised. Like, I was legitimately surprised, and in a good way. I really expected this episode to highlight how tight and how wound up the NovaCare complex was for the Eagles, and it was kind of the opposite. Now, it wasn't the vibes that you saw in Dallas, but Dallas at that point was riding high. They're partying on the sidelines and in practice, and everything was high energy and it felt good. But even just the overall mood, it really wasn't the doom and gloom that I kind of expected and the doom and gloom that you hear. Now, to credit to the Eagles, credit to the coaching staff, including the guy that I shit on all the time, Nick Sirianni, they said that in episode 1. Hey, if you leave outside of here, it seems like the sky is falling. And look, I'll be the first to say, the sky is falling. Like, this is a shit show. They're in their second collapse in 3 years. It's not good. But I fully expected a more, like a pressing team, and I didn't get that. I will say my big disappointment with this episode was simply that HBO did not highlight enough Jalen Hurts, because I've been a big defender of Jalen Hurts for 2 or 3 years now. I mean, I was, and hand up, like, I'll tell you right now, I was not a believer in him, but I became a believer. And all the Tanner McKee stuff that's coming up, like, a lot of fans want to see Tanner McKee. I don't see it personally. But there's no hiding the fact that the last 2 weeks, this guy has been brutal. He's been really, really bad. He's looked like rookie Jalen Hurts. And it was capped off by a 5-turnover game against the Chargers, where you go, okay, if you don't have 5 turnovers, you're probably winning that football game, right? And to not see his reaction to some of this, to not see the interactions on the sidelines with the receivers and whatnot. Like, we saw that in episode 1. We saw him not be on the same page with Devontae Smith, and we saw that interaction. It made me personally feel a lot better about the situation. Was I happy about the fact that it's week 13 and they're still not on the same page? No, but at least he talked. At least it wasn't a situation that I think a lot of Eagles fans fear, which is Carson Wentz 2.0. Because a lot of this is repeating itself, right? You're getting 2023 2.0, and then you're worried about the quarterback becoming Carson Wentz 2.0, and then you're worried about the wide receiver becoming T.O. 2.0. So for HBO not to just show a little bit of his mood and his reaction to all of these turnovers, and show the reaction also to his teammates to all these turnovers, I think they really dropped the ball with that. To defend them a little bit, they had a quick turnaround on this. The fact that the game happened on Monday, it goes into overtime, and they were able to get this out on Tuesday, credit to them on that front. And I do wonder if this was a normal Sunday game, would we have gotten that? And the other takeaway that I had, which was a positive one, was, does A.J. Brown seem like the kind of guy that doesn't like being here? I just mentioned that a lot of Eagles fans, I feel like, have PTSD when it comes to A.J. Brown. They're so terrified that he will become T.O., that he will be a distraction in the locker room. He'll be a diva. He'll want out. He'll be this, like, cancerous cell that infects the entire team. No, he's in Acme buying people groceries. Him and Devontae Smith are joking around. And ironically, it was about a plane crash. I found that kind of very ironic, actually. The ship is sinking, and they're talking about, okay, well, if a plane crashes, how do we get out of here? But overall, he didn't seem like this diva that I think the media wants him to be portrayed as, because they're desperate for a storyline, or at least they were for a while. Now the storyline is the team is collapsing again. Before that, if you've noticed, by the way, that storyline went out the window. That whole A.J. Brown being a diva, that has gone out the window. Now the storyline is, oh my God, the team's collapsing. Isn't that kind of funny how that happens? But look, he took ownership of it. He took ownership of not making plays when it mattered. He didn't have a great game. The ball went through his hands. He's usually a sure-handed wide receiver. It happened twice. It happened one time in the end zone. That would have been the go-ahead touchdown. But the fact remains, this team, since the bye week, is averaging 16 points a game. They're struggling to score touchdowns. They get in the red zone, and I, as an Eagles fan, go, okay, Jake Elliott, get him ready. You can make every excuse in the book on why this is happening, but the last bit of whatever you want to call it, like, it's late. It's like 3 a.m. right now. I'm cooked. But the last thing that I found really interesting was, and I wonder how much of this is the fact that this happened in the first 15 plays, or the fact that maybe my theory on this has been incorrect. But if you've been following this channel long enough, you know that I am a firm believer that Nick Sirianni is meddling once again in Kevin Patullo's decision making. I base this off the fact that this offense looks a lot like every time Nick Sirianni has ever touched the offense. His first year as head coach, when he was the play caller, looked like a lot like this. Uncreative, very predictable. And then he overruled Brian Johnson in 2023. That is a known fact. It is out there. Tim McManus from ESPN.com, one of the most respected Eagles reporters, he reported on the collapse of 2023. And one of the things he said was, well, Nick Sirianni would overrule Brian Johnson. What I found interesting in this particular episode was early in the game when they had Saquon running to the right side or left side and doing it, large chunks of yardage, and it looked like the old Saquon. He said, Kevin, keep doing it, meaning, it just appeared at that moment that maybe his hands were off the play calling for that particular moment. So I wonder how much of that, though, was the fact that it's the first 15 plays. I would love to have seen the entire video of Nick Sirianni on the sidelines. I go back to, though, I don't know what the guy does, other than come up with these like cheesy speeches about why we love football. To me, it's like he's Miss Lippy from Billy Madison. It's like a feel-good kumbaya thing. I can't believe they didn't cover the positivity bunny. Like, that's how desperate this team is, or at least you thought. But the vibes seem to be good. I was impressed by that. The only negative I can come away from this episode with, other than the loss, obviously, and the way they played, but coming away from behind the scenes stuff, was multiple coaches kept bringing up, like, we can't point fingers, and we got to get back on track. It wasn't necessarily get back on track, but it was more like, this is how we're gonna do it, and get the train back on the tracks. I'm not doing a good job of articulating this, but it was one of those where they kept saying it so much that I felt like there's no way doubt hasn't crept in on this football team. They kept pointing out, like, hey, season's not over, and and this is how we're going to get back on track. We can't point fingers. We can't point the blame. We got to play as a brotherhood. And it's like, how many times can you hear that before you go like, all right, well, are people pointing the fingers at me? I mean, overall, I don't know how much we learned from this episode. I think that had to do with the Monday night game. I think the best part of the episode, honestly, was Zach Ertz getting honored by the Commanders, and they showed that video of like the 87-year-old Kansas football player. That was hilarious. I was cracking up on my couch watching it. But for the Eagles standpoint, I didn't learn a ton. But my big takeaways, surprisingly, were semi-positive, and I didn't expect that because I am tired of this football team. Can't wait for the offseason. Don't enjoy watching them play. And probably not going to enjoy watching the Raiders game. That's kind of where I'm at. And I don't know who it was. I'm usually pretty good at picking up the voices, and I'm assuming it's somebody from WIP. But somebody on there, when they were pointing out like how the Eagles are in first place, and but yet there's panic in the streets. Somebody correctly pointed out, like, they're not winning the Super Bowl. Shit, they're not even going to the Super Bowl. And it's like, yeah, they're not. Because it does feel like it's 2023 all over again. Nick Sirianni did make a good point, though. They won 4 straight, they lost 2. They won 4 straight, they lost 2. The problem is now 2 has become 3. And they just haven't looked good at any point. So I thought the energy was good. And then the game happened. What are the odds that Jalen Hurts ends up turning the ball over 5 times again? Pretty slim. I think one of the best parts about Jalen Hurts' game is the fact that he doesn't turn the ball over. So I feel like he might have gotten all of those turnovers for the rest of the season out in one game. I expect him to be better, much better. But overall, I expected a little bit more doom and gloom on the sidelines or testy attitudes and pressing. I didn't get that, but what I also didn't get was a win. So that was disappointing. Please subscribe to the channel. That would be really cool if you could do that. You don't have to watch any more videos. Just subscribe. Subscribing is awesome. Hit thumbs up if you like this. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked for whatever reason. I'm going to go now. But as always, go Birds.